Hey, folks. Hey, welcome to the Law Self-Defense Show for today. What is today? Monday, August 22nd. I am, of course, Attorney Andrew Branca for Law Self-Defense. Thank you very much. Thank you. My apologies for being a couple minutes late. On Mondays and Wednesdays, my BJJ class is immediately before the show. Sometimes I'm a little longer getting back to my desk. Apologize for that. I was just busy spending the last hour getting my ass beat by a 90-pound woman who's a blue belt. She did not have much difficulty submitting Attorney Andrew Branca, I can tell you that much. But glad you are all here. Welcome aboard, everybody. As always, if you're watching this on YouTube, and frankly, the only place I set this up today was on YouTube because I was short of time. If you're looking at your screen and you see a red subscribe button, you're doing it wrong. Please hit that button until it turns gray. Hit the like, thumbs up, leave a comment, even if it's only your city and state. That helps us fool the YouTube algorithm into spreading news of our content more broadly. So all of that is always greatly appreciated. The most important thing you can do, of course, is subscribe, because that is what grows the law self-defense community, which is what we're all about with this free content. And I also, let's see, I want to mention today's sponsor. We have a new sponsor for today. I'm supposed to have a new graphic image, and it looks like I do. Let me see if I can save it here. Find it here, and I'll pull it up on the screen so we can all look at it together. Let's see. And there it is. All right. So let me share this screen with all of you. The sponsor of today's Law Self-Defense content is no other than Law of Self-Defense itself. I'm very pleased to announce that we're launching a Law of Self-Defense law school in scare quotes. This is not an accredited effort, but if any of you have ever wondered what law school is like, would enjoy the law school experience without the time, the 3 years, the cost, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and all the political correctness, the critical race theory, the diversity, inclusion, equity nonsense that contaminates modern day law schools based on my experience speaking at these institutions. If you'd like to get a traditional education in things like criminal law, criminal procedure, evidence, constitutional law, we're now offering those classes taught by experts right at lawofselfdefense.com. You can learn more about that at lawofselfdefense.com/law school. Get a traditional law school education taught very much in the law school manner. These are the same classes taught in the same manner as first year 1L law classes to incoming students to any traditional law school. You can take the same kinds of classes taught in the same way for a fraction of the cost, fraction of the time, and without the political toxicity that contaminates current day law schools. Learn more about that at lawselfdefense.com/law school. The first class starts September 7th, folks. It's only about 2 weeks away, and enroll by then or not. It's up to you. But I encourage you at least to take an opportunity at the offer at lawselfdefense.com/law school. All right. So the main thing I wanted to touch upon today in this impromptu show was this video that's come out of Arkansas of police using physical force, physical violence upon an apparently non-compliant criminal suspect. And I don't know what's happening in this event. Perhaps new information has come out in the last couple of hours that I'm not aware of, but all I'm aware of is what I have seen in this video that's on Twitter and presumably elsewhere. And I'm going to comment based just on the video. Now, obviously, if new information comes out that would affect the analysis, then we change the analysis. My point in this video is to illustrate that I don't know exactly what's happening based on this video, and neither do you, or does anybody else. whose only information to go on is this video. And when I see this reflexive anti-cop response that obviously this must be police abuse, there can be no other possible explanation. I don't think any of us can make that determination based on this video, especially since we don't see what happens before, we don't see what happens after. It's relatively a short piece of video. And I can tell you that no police use of force ever looks good. They always look ugly. And in the overwhelming number of cases, it's not the police that determine how much force is used in making an arrest. It's the suspect who determines how much force is made during an arrest. Is it theoretically possible that the three cops in this video just set out today, woke up this morning, had a cup of coffee, and decided to beat the crap out of some guy they were trying to arrest who was compliant with arrest, who just decided to use excessive force on this guy when they didn't have to? Sure, anything's possible. Again, I don't know what actually happened here, and neither do you. That's the point. I'm tired of these people giving these reflexive, emotional, childlike responses without even bothering to hear both sides of the story, because there's a lot going on here that we can't see in this video. We can't see the before, we can't see the after, we can't see, with a few rare exceptions, the suspect's hands throughout this video. We don't know what he's doing, what he's grabbing, what he's reaching for, based alone on this video. Is it possible this is a case of police abuse? Maybe. It could be, in which case the officers ought to be held accountable. And by the way, we have processes for holding the officers accountable. Might there be an explanation that justifies this use of force by the police? Yes, I can imagine several. Sorry, folks, I'm hearing a weird sound on my end. Not sure what that was about. Yes, I can imagine several scenarios in which this use of force would be lawful. And also, people are, as often occurs in these cases, they're asking the wrong questions. And if you ask the wrong questions, you shouldn't be surprised when you get to the when you arrive at the wrong answer. So you have to understand the right questions to ask. My main point here, however, is that none of us, based solely on this video, can know to any degree of reasonable certainty whether or not the use of force we see in this video was justified or not. There's just not enough information in this video. Can we know it's ugly? Yeah, sure. It's an ugly use of force. No question about it. Can I reasonably hypothesize that this was a non-compliant suspect being subject to lawful arrest? Yeah. Because the police aren't roving bands that just beat the crap out of citizens walking down the street for no good reason. And I know someone's going to point out a 1 in a million case where that actually happened. I don't care, folks. I'm sick of this childlike thinking where the one exception, the 0.01% exception somehow is supposed to disprove the 99.99% of the norm. Reasonable people presume the norm unless they've seen evidence to the contrary. That's what a reasonable presumption is. That's how we all deal with the world, folks. That's how every living organism deals with this environment. It doesn't imagine that everything it encounters in the environment is the exception. If it did that, it would die. We come up with general rules of thumb. We come up with reasonable presumptions of what to expect, of how to interpret things. It doesn't mean our presumptions can't be incorrect. If there's evidence to the contrary, sure, those presumptions are rebuttable. But I'd need to see evidence to the contrary. We don't have evidence of that here. Might that evidence develop? Of course. And I'd be happy to see it. But this reflexive jumping to the anti-cop conclusion when we see an admittedly use of force, it's just not adult thinking. It's not responsible thinking. With these comments early today, none of them had heard the cops' side of the story, and maybe the cops don't have a reasonable side of their story. I don't know, but neither do they. They don't know either because they haven't asked the cops. The cops haven't made a statement, at least not as of the time they were making their excited remarks about this event. So, folks, anytime you're not looking at both sides of the story before arriving at an emotionally driven conclusion, you're not thinking like an adult. You're thinking like an overexcited child. And it's unbecoming. It's irresponsible. And frankly, in this context, it only fosters the kind of cop hatred of cops that we have too much of in this country already. None of you, if faced with a threat of violence, would call upon that suspect in that video for help. And for all the people saying, well, why didn't they just handcuff him? It's three cops. It's one suspect. Surely they can just handcuff him. None of you making that statement have ever tried to handcuff someone who's violently resisting being handcuffed. It's extremely difficult. It would be extremely difficult for 6 people to forcibly handcuff a suspect who's violently resisting. It's just not that easy to do. And the first thing, folks, the sequence is not handcuffing, then control. The sequence is control and then handcuffing. You have to achieve control first. And one of the ways you achieve control is by using blunt force, pain techniques to compel compliance, to compel control, so you can get the cuffs on. That suspect, the moment he gets cuffed, is determined by him. Okay, so let's take a look at the video, shall we? Now that I've unintentionally went on a mini rant there. And by the way, folks, I'll be the first person to say, if it turns out the cops don't have a reasonable explanation for this use of force, I'll be the first one to call for them being held accountable, for being fired, for being prosecuted. But I think it's ridiculous to presume that's the case when you haven't even asked them yet. Because if that's the standard, we're going to have police departments across this country who simply will not go hands-on with resistant suspects. Is that the world you want to live in? Really? Because anytime they go hands-on, it can start to look ugly pretty damn quick, especially when you're shown an edited, abbreviated clip of what happened. Not the before, not the after, not multiple angles. Use your heads, people. All right, so let's take a look at this video. Here we go. Oh, by the way, there was, first of all, my first apology. There is music playing in the background. This video is made presumably from a smartphone from inside someone's car or truck. They're playing music inside the vehicle. The music is horrific. It's almost worse than the beating. And I apologize for having to inflict this music upon you. I almost thought about just muting the sound completely. But there were a few words said that I thought, I don't know, maybe people would think were important. I didn't want to be perceived as hiding anything. So you're part of watching this with the audio is you get to listen to this horrific music. If any of you are a fan of this music, may God have mercy on your souls. I don't know what else to say. But in any case, so the music's there. There is also a little bit of profanity. The S word a couple of times. There's a very quiet F word. I think I've bleeped those out. I do my best, folks. I'm sorry. All right, so here we go with this video. And again, my apologies for this horror that is the music for much of this. Here we go. All right, so that's the video. By the way, did anybody count how many times that suspect got his head bounced off the street? Because we're going to hear that a lot, right? That the police repeatedly bounced his head off the street. That one cop lifted the suspect's head a couple of inches and banged it on the street once. One time. Now, there were a lot of punches. Most of the punches thrown by that same cop to the suspect's face and head were thrown while holding the suspect's head down on the street. So there wasn't this bouncing effect, but I imagine we're going to hear a lot about the head being bounced on the street. Now, other cops are throwing knees to, it looks like, to kidneys. Who knows what the cop on the far side is doing? It's hard to tell, except I think it's reasonable to infer he's also hands on, knees on, whatever, with this suspect. Do the cops need to have a reason to use force like this on a suspect? Yes, of course. They can't just walk down the street and inflict a beating on somebody. Is a suspect who's subject to lawful arrest on legal grounds, do they have a legal duty to comply with that lawful arrest? Yes. Can the police use force to compel compliance with that lawful arrest? Yes, they can. Can that force include punches and knees to the kidney to compel compliance? Yes, it can include all that. Does bouncing the guy's head on the sidewalk, is that automatically deadly force? No, it's not automatically deadly force. And I know this is causing a lot of confusion for people. Now, the reason I mentioned the deadly force, of course, is that the police are not normally allowed to use deadly force to compel compliance with lawful arrest in the absence of a deadly force threat to the officers or the public or some innocent party. So these officers had escalated to deadly force for the purpose of compelling compliance with a lawful arrest. Arguably, they've used excessive force and ought to be held accountable for that. But not every 2-inch bounce of someone's head once off a sidewalk constitutes deadly force. And I know everyone's thinking about the George Zimmerman case. George Zimmerman was getting his head beat into the sidewalk by Trayvon Martin. And certainly I argued at the time, well, that would qualify as deadly force. But you have to understand the question that's being asked. In the case of George Zimmerman, him getting his head bounced off the sidewalk, the question is, would a reasonable person in his position, perceive that as likely to cause death or serious bodily harm? More accurately, could the state disprove beyond a reasonable doubt that George Zimmerman could reasonably perceive that threat as deadly? That's the question. Not whether it's actually deadly, but whether someone in George Zimmerman's position could reasonably perceive it as deadly. And could the state disprove that belief beyond a reasonable doubt? That's the standard. It could be 90% likely it's not actually a deadly force blow. And it's still enough to justify Zimmerman using deadly force in self-defense if the state's unable to disprove beyond a reasonable doubt that Zimmerman reasonably perceived it as deadly force. The question isn't what's actually the case. The question is, what's the reasonable perception, and can the state disprove Zimmerman's claim of having that reasonable perception beyond a reasonable doubt? So it's not automatic, a demonstrably proven fact beyond contestation that banging someone's head an inch or two off the street onto the street automatically qualifies as deadly force. Especially, by the way, we also have to consider the fact that force used by police in compelling compliance with the lawful arrest is not the same as force being used by a criminal aggressor. A criminal aggressor presumably will continue their use of force until they get tired. That's not what the police are doing. The police are privileged to continue using force until you actually comply with arrest. So if you comply with arrest, guess what? You get to flip the switch, stopping the force. That's not true when the force is being inflicted by a criminal aggressor. You don't get to do something that makes the criminal aggressor stop using force on you, but you can with the police. You just comply with the arrest and the force stops, or the force doesn't stop. Then you have a cause of action. Then they've acted wrongly, but it's up to you. So might further evidence develop? Might the cops tell their side of the story? And they were doing this out of retribution. They were doing this for which obviously would not be a good legal reason. They were doing it on grounds that would not justify this degree of impact force on the suspect. Sure, That could be the case. Maybe the cops don't have a good reason here, don't have a legally sufficient reason for this use of force. And then they should be held accountable. But you can't tell that from this video. For most of this video, except for little glimpses from here and there, we can't see the suspect's hands. We don't know from this video what was in his hands, if anything, what might apparently have been in his hands. Was he reaching for his waistband? Might there have been a weapon there? Would the police have reason to believe there was a weapon? We know this suspect had already rather viciously attacked at least one of the officers by punching him in the back of the head. So we know he's violent. This is not some pacifist. Says, sure, officers, arrest me, and then they just started beating him up. That's not what happened here. Do we know if he's grabbed one of the officers by the scrotum and is holding on for dear life, and that's why they're punching him or kicking him? I don't know, but you don't know either until we hear the officer's side of the story. And you can't see his hands throughout this beating, folks. You can't see his hands throughout the entirety of this use of force. I've watched the video. So that's the other contemptible thing. The liars. Why lie about the video? We've seen it. We've seen it. We know we cannot see his hands throughout the encounter. We know he's not just protecting his head the whole time. That's not true. I don't know if anybody's scrotum was being grabbed, folks. All I'm saying is there are possible explanations that would justify this use of force. I don't know, but neither do you. Okay. Let's see. All right. By the way, if anybody wants questions answered, feel free to put them in the super chat. I will take a look at that. In fact, let me go ahead and pull that up now. See if I can remember how to do that. It's a brand new week, folks. A brand new week. Let's see. Kevin Dorr, $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Kevin. Writes, I'm more willing to put my hands behind me if I'm not being punched in the face over and over again. Yeah, so how did we get to that point? How did we get to the point where the cops were punching him in the face? What led up to that? Do you know, Kevin? Not if the only information you have to go on is this video. You don't know how we got to that point because the video's not shared prior to that point. Right? Are there circumstances that would justify the police punching this guy in the face? Absolutely. They're easy to imagine. By the way, simply not putting your hands behind your back is enough to get punched in the face. You have a legal duty to comply with lawful arrest. And if you don't, the police are allowed to use physical force to compel your compliance, at least to the degree of non-deadly force. So much jumping to the hate against the police. It's unbelievable. Okay, let's see. I think that's the only super chat. I did have another video I can share with all of you. This was a one-punch kill. It's not related to this particular police event. It's completely independent. But if any of you, as I've talked about before, let's see if I can add this to the StreamYard so I can play it for all of you. As I've mentioned to all of you before, normally an empty-handed blow to the face is going to be treated by the courts presumptively as a non-deadly force attack, against which deadly defensive force would not be warranted. Let's see. But that said, so going to the gun to stop someone trying to punch you in the face, at least one punch, would not normally be a proportional response. The threatened punch being a non-deadly threat of force, going to the gun being a deadly force response. Deadly response to non-deadly threat, disproportional. Now, there are circumstances in which a thrown punch could qualify as force likely to cause death or grave bodily harm if there are aggravating factors, if the person throwing the punch is much larger or much stronger or has an exceptional fighting ability than the defender, for example. There's a variety of aggravating circumstances that could come into play, or if there's multiple attackers throwing punches, or if it's a sustained beating, or if the defender has some exceptional vulnerability to attack, like they're on blood thinners, for example. So a punch that normally would not be expected to inflict death or serious bodily injury to a typical defender could easily kill that defender because they're on blood thinners. There's lots of aggravating factors that could come into play. But normally they don't exist. The traditional thrown fist between two guys of similar size, strength, and fighting ability, the courts are going to treat as non-deadly force, against which only non-deadly defensive force would be appropriate. That said, there are punches that do kill. Single punches that do kill. So if you're ever thinking that someday you might find yourself in a position where you've, say, shot and killed somebody to defend yourself against a thrown fist, and you'd like to be able to document, hey, you're aware of at least one incident where someone was killed by a thrown fist, and document it to the point where you might be able to introduce evidence of that other event, unrelated to your event, introduce evidence of that other event into court so the jury could see it, well, you might want to document today's show in particular, maybe just by leaving a comment, sending yourself an email with the link and a comment, something along those lines. You don't need a lot of documentation, but you need more than zero documentation if you hope to get this kind of thing introduced into evidence in court. So I'm going to share that video here with you. A single punch resulting in death, the death of the victim. Normally how this happens, of course, is the punch induces immediate unconsciousness in the victim falls, strikes their head on the ground, a curb, a hard surface, suffers a secondary injury, directly the result of the punch. Of course, wouldn't have happened but for the punch. And the secondary injury results in a brain injury, blood in the brain that ultimately kills the person. Still the cause of the punch, of course, even though the punch didn't directly cause the death, that secondary impact did. So here's that video. Let's go with that. Oh, now that I'm showing it, sorry about that. I'm not sure if the victim actually died here. The victim may just have had a brain bleed, but this is the kind of blow that typically results in a brain bleed where there is death. I'm vaguely recalling now that in this event, that the victim may not have died, but certainly it's the kind of attack that could easily have inflicted death. And a common theme we'll see here, by the way, is it's a ambush attack. So the victim never saw the punch coming. It's rather difficult to knock somebody out if they can see the punch coming, unless you have really exceptional fighting skills. You're exceptionally strong, exceptionally fast hands, exceptional fighting experience, because most people at least flinch when they see a fist coming their way, and that's usually enough to avoid the knockout. So most of these knockout one-punch deaths are ambush attacks where the victim never sees the punch coming. Here we have someone who was the victim here is a customer in a fast food joint. I guess he said something that bothered one of the employees. The employee comes around the counter and just takes a big sliding step and a big haymaker right into the side of the customer's head. It doesn't appear the customer ever saw the punch coming, and that was it for the customer. And then I think we see the employee after the punch kind of gather his stuff and walk out of work. But here's that video. There's the customer in the hat. Here's the employee. Bam. Big sliding step, big haymaker. That's it for the customer. There's the employee, goes behind the counter. Looks like he grabs his stuff and walks out. So what's your best defense against that kind of attack, folks? It's not a 1 second draw of your pistol, because this customer, he could have had 8 guns on him. It wouldn't have helped him because he wasn't looking. He had no idea that punch was coming. He was unaware of his environment. If he was aware of his environment, he might not have been subject to the punch at all, or at least might have been able to defend himself. But in any case, having a gun would not have helped this guy because this guy never saw it coming. Don't be the person who never sees it coming, especially if you've just gotten in a verbal confrontation with someone, as this customer did with the employee. You start mouthing off to someone. It doesn't mean they're justified in punching you because you mouthed off. They're not. Your words, your insults are not enough to justify their use of physical force upon you, but they may do it anyway. And you don't want to be a helpless, blindsided victim of their unlawful use of force, right? Doesn't mean they're right. They're not right. But you don't much care if they were right or not if you're dead. So either don't mouth off, or if you do mouth off, well, keep an eye on the person you just insulted, because they may not take it well. Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to name the fast food place. It hardly matters. I mean, unless I guess it's a Popeyes, then it would be worth mentioning. You want to learn how to fight, you can go to BJJ and or Popeyes, or hang out in a Walmart parking lot. Those are all great places to get into a fight based on the video evidence. All right, folks, let's see. I'll take another look at super chats, and then I may, let's see. Was there anything else from last week I didn't get to that I wanted? Oh, yeah. Okay. So I did have something else. Let me see, but I don't have the video ready. Let me see if I can export the video while I'm talking and get that ready for to share with everybody. This other one involves a oh, come on. Sorry, folks. A police shooting here in Denver. That's kind of interesting. And I'll see. It may take too long for the video to pull up, so I may just have to describe it. But it's I'm not sure it's sufficiently important at this point to build a whole show around. So let me look at this other comment here. It looks like it's from Kevin again. Kevin, thank you very much. A $10 super chat this time. I think I have a bigger. Yay! Thank you, Kevin. Super applause for Kevin. Much appreciated. So Kevin writes, hopefully the police have cams. Presumably he means body-worn cameras. After cops being locked down, Gestapo and wrestling mothers sitting on an empty bleacher for not wearing a mask, I'm less likely to give cops the benefit of the doubt. If you were making these remarks about anybody else, it would be contemptible, right? If you were doing this based on race or gender, because every group of people has bad actors. So you point to 2 cases of bad actors here and every cop's a scumbag? That's the argument, Kevin? Because cops can be bad, that means they are bad? That's what we're going to presume? Do you know any cops personally? Like in your neighborhood or friends? You ever have a positive interaction with a police officer in your life? Because I've had a lot of interaction with police. And the ones I know, without exception, are fantastic people. Now, there may be some self-selection here, but I can assure you of one thing. They're not all dirtbags. And presuming they are is stupid thinking. All right. So this shooting event in Denver. So we had a police shooting in Denver. Come on. Whoops. So we had a police shooting in Denver. So it involved 4 or 5 officers. I believe 3 officers fired shots. A total of 6 or 7 shots were fired, a mix among the officers. So like 3 shots, 2 shots, 1 shot per officer kind of thing. The officers were working cooperatively, approaching a suspect. It was Denver at night. It was crowded. It was a party atmosphere outside a club, outside a food vendor trailer place. And this guy, the suspect, had apparently been punching or shoving someone, which is what initially attracted the officer's attention. I believe the officers were also informed he may have a gun on him. Turned out he did have a gun on him in 1911, a Rock Island Armory, 1911 in 10 millimeter. So he was, I I don't want to say he was compensating for anything. Nothing wrong with a 10 millimeter, but it's a man's gun. Let's put it that way, especially in that 1911 flavor. But anyway, the cops are approaching around the crowd, around the food van, through parked cars, between parked cars, and the suspect, and it appears a buddy of his who gets out of town pretty quick. But the suspect apparently sees the cops approaching, backs up from between two cars, and as the cops are closing on him within a few feet, so the cops have eyes on, cops have their hands on their pistols. They're concerned about violence here. In this crowded environment, the bad guy reaches for his waistband, pulls out the gun, and then tosses the gun away to the side, and then gets shot by the police. The difficulty here is that several of the police rounds or fragments of the round injured innocent bystanders. So now, of course, the innocent bystanders are upset, and the question arises, was the officer's use of force reasonable in the circumstances? It largely depends on what the officers had reason to believe. Now, if they had reason to believe they were approaching a violent armed suspect, and he apparently went for his gun, and he literally went for his gun. He got the gun out of his waistband. He had it in his hand. Now, it's true, he apparently threw it to the side, but there's a reaction gap that happens. The cop sees the gun in his hand. One cop fires. The other cops are allowed to presume that their fellow officer is making a rational decision in firing, so they fire. Does it matter that it was a crowded area, that there were bystanders there? Does that change the officer's use of force equation? Not much, to tell you the truth. If the officers were facing an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury from the suspect, and of course, if he fires, he's also likely to hit innocent bystanders, right? So the risk to the bystanders doesn't go away if the cops do nothing. Well, then they're allowed to use deadly defensive force to neutralize that threat to themselves and others. Is it bad that this went down in a crowded environment? Is it bad the bystanders got injured? Yes, of course, it's terrible. But it's not like the police dropped the armed suspect into the crowd and then went after him. The suspect put himself in the crowd and created the circumstances in which the police needed to make an armed confrontation of him. He was actively threatening, using violence on people while armed with a gun. I mean, we could live in a world where the police don't respond to events like that, but I don't think you'd like it much. The real solution, of course, is to take these bad actors, and this suspect was unlawfully in possession of the gun. He had prior convictions. Take these bad actors and put them in prison and keep them there. And then we don't have to worry about them walking around the nightlife scene in Denver with 1911s and 10 millimeter threatening people and inducing gunfights in crowded environments. That would be nice if we actually held the criminals accountable, but maybe the cops are dirtbags here too, right? I mean, that's supposed to be the standard perspective of these things. Okay. Well, it looks like I'm trying to close this out. All right, let me see if I can pull. I do have that Denver body cam video. Let me see if I can pull this up. And if I can, I'll play it for everybody. It's a little complicated to view because it shows individual police body cameras, and there was a body camera on each of the cops involved. And then it also shows an amalgamation of like all the cameras at once. But the footage is too. Okay. The footage is too large to upload. Let me see if I can do it this way. And I can. All right. So this is working. There is no, I mean, obviously YouTube will do its normal YouTube thing and demonetize today's show because I'm showing this video. Thank you very much, YouTube. That's much appreciated. The video doesn't show any gore. So the news media that shared this body worn camera, it's not sourced from the police department. I don't have that video. It's sourced from media reports, and they cut the video at the moment that the suspect, the shots are fired, the suspect is shot. So we don't see any gore. You don't have to worry about that. I don't even believe there's any profanity. I'm not sure though. Don't hold me to it. There's almost no audio because when body cameras are initially triggered. Sorry, there's like a 30 second delay before the audio kicks in. And I think only one of the cameras picks up a little bit of audio. So there shouldn't be much audio issue to worry about. By the way, Mike Sullivan has a super chat, $5. Thank you very much, Mike. That's much appreciated. It says, need a mailing address. Have an office warming present for you. Well, that's very kind, Mike. You can send that to 200 South Wilcox Street, Suite 186, Castle Rock, Colorado, 80109. Don't visit us at that address, folks. That's just our mailbox. But 200 South Wilcox Street, Suite 186, Castle Rock, Colorado, 80109. We'd love to get an office warming gift. That would be much appreciated. Tony K, $5 super chat. Thank you. Writes, Minneapolis backyard shooting by Care 11 news guy. News guy died. Like to get your take on it. I'll look it up. I haven't seen it, so I'll take a look, Tony, for sure. I appreciate that. Let's see. Jan Diaz, $20 super chat, says, well, in court. Whoops. Thank you, John Diaz. Sorry. $20 super chat. Thank you, John. Writes, well, in court, we do give the benefit of the doubt to the accused. The state has the burden of proof. So I just wonder if maybe we should be skeptical of the cops first and give benefit of the doubt to the arrested. Why do we have to jump to conclusions at all? We're going to know what the police side of the story is shortly. And if we don't know, well, that would be a reason to infer a negative perception of what happened. Right? If the cops go silent, if this department has nothing to say about this use of force, yeah, I damn well have questions too. But you got to give the other side the opportunity to tell their version of what happened. Otherwise, you're only going off one side of the story, folks. Have we not been to high school? Do we not know how that works out? Do we not understand that if you've only seen one side of the story, it always sounds compelling? And then we all look like idiots when we hear the other side of the story because there was another side. So I don't know why we have to give the benefit of the doubt. Now, might there be circumstances in which there would appear to be no doubt, where we had the full video of the entire interaction from when the police arrived on scene to when the suspect was carted away, maybe from multiple camera angles? Is it theoretically possible we could have had enough information to arrive at a reasonable understanding of what happened? That's theoretically possible. We comment on a lot of videos where that appears to be the case. But this was what, 30 seconds of video, 40 seconds of video? Starting in the midst of the action? That's not enough, especially one angle when the person's on the ground, their hands are concealed most of the time from the camera view. That's not enough for me to feel comfortable jumping at conclusions. Obviously, everybody else can do what they think is best. Caboose, $4.99 super chat. Thank you very much. Writes, I want that guy's 10 millimeter 1911. Yeah, Rock Island makes pretty good 1911s. That would be a fun gun to shoot, I would think. I wonder if it's a long slide. 10 millimeter is a real round, folks. It's a handful to shoot. All right, so here, let me see if I can share this screen with all of you. So the suspect here was named Jordan Waddy. We're going to have a couple little disclaimers here that the news media put on this post. This is a shooting taking place on 20th and Larimer. 20th is a main downtown street in Denver. Lots of bars, lots of stuff happening. We'll see a pretty good crowd in these videos. And we have videos from the body-worn camera perspective and also what looks like a security video from inside one of the establishments where this event took place. So this event, the shooting took place on the sidewalk outside this establishment. July 17th is the date of the event, 1:35 a.m. That's a clue, folks. If you're out at 1:35 a.m., you got a good reason, because that's when stuff like this tends to go down. So here we go. It is about 6 minutes of video. So get comfortable, refresh your coffee if you have the need, and I'll pretty much try to let it run straight through. So here we go. Yeah, so the news media did that. So these are the cameras. Yeah. Frankly, I don't find this all that helpful, but the cops are arriving on the scene. They've been called there because Wadi was reported as attacking people, being dangerous, having a gun. He's walking down the sidewalk. Wadi is. He's going to try to emerge between two cars. The cops are flanking him, trying to get ahead of him. They're approaching him here. That's Wadi there in the middle with, you see the black pants. He's pulled his gun out. He's just tossed the gun, and he gets fired on by police. So here's one body camera. This is body camera 170X from one officer. Approaching through the crowd. You see how busy it is. Very crowded. Not hard to see how bystanders will get injured. Food cart there. Cops flanking, trying to get ahead of Wadi. Between the two cars. He reaches for his waistband, pulls out a pistol. There he goes. Up, tosses the gun right there. Hands go up. But of course, there's a reaction gap, right? The cop sees the gun in the hand, and that's when they make the decision to shoot. And there's a 0.2 of a second before that's going to change, especially when they hear other cops shooting. Again, here's another cop. This is body cam 773. There he is. There's Wadi. He goes back through. He's turned his back. Walks to the sidewalk. As soon as he gets around the car, he goes for his waistband, pulls the gun out. There's a gunshot, of course. Next body camera, 432, different officer. You can see this, obviously a group of officers have been called. So this is a serious call. There's a whole bunch of them. They're going to try to overwhelm this guy with superior force so they don't have to go. He could have stopped right there, right? So he's being non-compliant. Putting your hands up and walking away is not being compliant, folks. Another view, body camera 294S. Again, more flanking. Cops working cooperatively. I mean, that's good police work. He's non-compliant. Hands up. He goes to see his left hand, goes right for the waistband there. Gun out, gets shot. Could he have just left his hands up? The moment he was stepped out on the street, came out from between those two cars? Yes, of course. Would he have gotten shot then? Nope. Would he have gotten arrested for having the gun? Maybe a felony? Sure. That's what happens when you're a bad guy, unlawfully carrying a gun. There's the gun. There's the shot. There's the gun flying through the air. You can see the shadow actually on the backboard there. Again, they're going to play all these simultaneously. I don't really find this view to be very helpful. But of course, all the lawyers will be picking through every second of this for the second-by-second breakdown. The bystanders who are injured are presumably suing the city of Denver and the police department. So it sounded to me like 6 shots. Here's a street camera view. You see those people run pretty quick once they start hearing the shouts and the gunshots. Wadi's going to come back through the cars. Where is he? Well, I guess the cops still have to move up. So this is a long view. So the cops are looking for him. They see him walking down the street. Waddy's in the middle. He's gonna turn to the left behind the food cart, come out in the street. There he is, hands up, walks back between the cars, and as soon as he gets on the other side of that vehicle, he goes for his waistband with his left hand. The gun comes out, and that's when he gets shot. And everybody, run, 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 little mice. Don't want to stay there. And this is a camera from inside the building that's there, inside that beer hall, inside and outside, I guess. There's a security guard. You'll see the security guard hit the ground pretty hard once the shots fire. Very, very prudent. He goes low. People are saying, thank you. Oh, there's the action. And yeah, that's really all there is to see. So, what are the bystanders who were injured going to argue? They're going to argue that the police here acted recklessly in one manner or another. Can you make that argument, especially in civil court? Sure. What's your burden of proof in civil court? Preponderance of the evidence, 51% of the evidence. If you've got an injured victim and you're suing the state, you're suing the city, you're suing the police department, who, a jury's going to conclude they have plenty of money, probably got insurance. Might you make some money? Sure. Are you really entitled to some money? Did the cops actually do anything wrong here? I don't see it. I certainly wouldn't do it as a criminal prosecution where I had to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. If anything, I would argue that Waddy, the suspect here, is responsible for all the harm that occurred. Certainly, if a police round had killed somebody, my position would be that Waddy's guilty of felony murder for that death. He was engaged in felony conduct, a felon, convicted felon in possession of a gun unlawfully. And somebody died as a result of his having been engaged, or his flight from, or his resistance to that felony being committed there. So again, I would put the burden on Waddy, but of course there's no purpose suing Waddy. I actually don't know if Waddy survived this, but even if he did, he's not going to have any money. And certainly if he didn't, there's be no point to suing him civilly. All right, so that's about an hour, folks. So I think I'll take another look at the super chats just to see if anything else has come in that I need to address. Again, if you'd like a question answered on this content or any other content, feel free to post it as a super chat, and I'll be glad to address it. Let's see. Yeah, so Elena Stansby, 20 British pounds. Woo! Thank you, Elena. Next time I'm in the UK, I'll buy you a pint, Elena. She writes, we all saw the Rittenhouse videos as well. Didn't stop people seeing things that simply were not there. Yes, this happens all the time. People go off half-cocked. Remember Michael Brown? Remember the Gentle Giant? All those witnesses who saw the police officer execute Michael Brown while he was on his knees begging for his life, it was all nonsense. It was all lies. All lies. Remember Trayvon Martin as a 12-year-old killed over Skittles? It was all lies. Remember Marissa Alexander who fired, she just fired a shot in the air. She was an abuse victim, defending herself against her husband. Her husband, who was standing with his two small children on the opposite side of the room, and the bullet hole was in the wall next to his head. That warning shot. It's all nonsense. Remember Rittenhouse? He shot a bunch of black people, didn't he? Kyle Rittenhouse. That was the narrative that the media propagated, that people still believe to this day, that Rittenhouse was some racist killer. It's all lies. It's all lies, folks. And so at the cost of waiting hours, a day, 2 days to get the other side of the story, when we have such incomplete and partial and ambiguous evidence to start with, just jumping to the conclusion that these cops are a bunch of maniacs, which they could be, but that's not the norm. Jumping to that conclusion before we have an opportunity to hear the other side of the story, it's just not adult thinking, folks. It's not adult judgment. Soy Mafia SGD $2. I don't know what SGD is. I don't know what currency that is, but thank you very much. Writes, and there may be a language issue here, writes, Drew women escape cuffs and shoot witnesses with AR. Oh, right. The woman who recovered the AR from inside the police vehicle got out of her handcuffs. It's yeah, this happens, folks. People get out of handcuffs. It's actually not that uncommon. And often they get out of handcuffs and they either access a gun inside the patrol car or they have a gun on their person that wasn't detected during the pat down. Sometimes the pat downs are pretty shoddy, especially if the suspect is already handcuffed, or maybe a cop thinks someone else already did the pat down. And you think you have a guy securely handcuffed in the back of the car and he comes out with a gun. Not handcuffed behind his back anymore. That's not uncommon. Yeah, if you've ever been cuffed for serious purposes, I don't want to know about your kinks, folks. If you've ever been cuffed for serious purposes, when they're properly applied, they go on pretty hard. Let's see. Caboose, who wanted the guy's 10 millimeter 1911, also writes another $5 super chat. Thanks. Says, you got something to say about people out at 2 a.m.? That's when I leave work. There's nothing wrong with people out at 2 a.m. There's something wrong with 2 a.m. 2 a.m. is a high risk part of the day. Just, have your head on a swivel. Teach All Nations, $5 super chat. Thank you very much. Writes, thanks for the correction, Andrew. I certainly jumped to the conclusion that the cops are wrong. I need to be more careful in the future. Maybe the cops in Arkansas were wrong, folks. I don't know. But I know that you don't know either. So let's hear both sides and then come to a reasonable conclusion based on actual evidence and explanations. John Diaz, $5 super chat. Speaking about the Waddy case in Denver, says, best thing is just hands up, stop, tell the cops where the gun is, let them get it. Well, just put your hands up. That helps a lot. The cops are going to find the gun, whether you tell them about it or not. But a pretty good way to get shot is to reach for the gun in your waistband. That's how that kid in Cleveland got shot. What the heck was his name? 12 or 13-year-old in Cleveland. Now he was a big kid. He was 200 pounds. There's pictures of his mom holding up his jeans, and his jeans this was an adult size 12-year-old, very, very large 12-year-old, approached by the cops because he was walking around a park pointing an apparent gun at people. The kid happens to be black. He was pointing a gun at other people in the park. They were black. They called the cops. Someone's walking around a park pointing an apparent gun at people. 911 forwards the call to responding officers. They get to the scene. They pull up in their patrol car, and this 200-pound 12-year-old reaches for an apparent gun in his waistband, and he gets shot and killed. Now, the gun turned out to be a toy, an airsoft or a BB gun. But I've seen the photos, folks. In fact, the police chief in Cleveland, who was also black, had a press conference where he says the kid's apparent gun was indistinguishable from a real gun. And it looks just like a 1911 to me, at least in the time frame and under the circumstances in which the responding officers would have seen it. Tamil Rice, that's the name. Thanks in the comments. I appreciate that. Tamir. I thought it was Tamir with an R. Tamir Rice. But nobody would have shot Tamir Rice if they knew it was a fake gun or if he hadn't reached for it. But you reach for an apparent gun in your waistband, that's a good way of getting shot and killed by the police. So please don't do that. It's not a good outcome for anybody. And I think that's about it. And we're right just over the top of the hour. So thank you very much again, folks, for joining us. Again, a reminder, we've just launched our Law of Self-Defense law classes. We're calling them expert law classes. The first one starts September 7th. Criminal law being taught by attorney Steve Gosney. You've seen Steve Gosney on my show many times as a guest. He's an extremely experienced criminal attorney on both the prosecution and the defense side, at both the trial level and the appellate level. And he's kindly agreed to teach this criminal law class for us starting September 7th, a semester-long law school course on criminal law, just as if you went to law school and took it, except taught in plain English at a fraction of the time, a fraction of the cost that it would take to go to law school. So if you've ever wanted a truly expert education in criminal law from an expert, Attorney Steve Gosney, now would be the opportunity to take advantage of that. You can learn more about that at lawofselfdefense.com/law school. And with that said, folks, just a reminder, if you carry a gun so that you're hard to kill, that's why I carry a gun, so I'm hard to kill, so my family is hard to kill, then you also owe it to yourself and your family to make sure you know the law so you're hard to convict as well. Until next time, I remain Attorney Andrew Branca for Law of Self-Defense. Stay safe.